You know, Randy, the first time I met him, I didn't know anything about the Christian Dental Society, and it's because of Randy that I'm here today.
Amen. Yeah.
That was 15 years ago, and in those 15 years we've done over 25 countries. We've gone over 30 missions with 15 different Christian organizations. So today we get to tell you why we do what we do with missionary dentistry. So when someone comes and asks you, why would you leave the comforts of home and the relative security of America to spend your hard-earned money and free time to travel to a developing country to basically do dentistry out of a suitcase, what do you say? You know, people think that we're crazy sometimes. but we think that they're missing out, and we're going to show you why. Because our prayer here is that through this presentation, which validates our passion for missions, it will stimulate, excite, and enable you to better answer this question of why you would go on a short-term dental missions. Now, Diane and I are mission buddies. Yes. And we go on trips, all of our trips together. And we're going to take you through 24 countries in the next hour, sharing some amazing stories and experiences. And tomorrow we're going to get a chance to show you how we do it. But today, it's about why we're doing it. Why we're doing it, for example, this lady in white here is from southern India, where the tsunami hit so hard in 2004 and killed over 200,000 people. For 30 years, she had prayed for Christian missionaries to come to her village. And we were the first ones that ever came to her village. Okay, so this is India. This is one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. We were there in February, as Denny was there in February on a separate trip. Which country do you think that is? Haiti. We have somebody from Haiti here. So, we go for lots of reasons. I mean, people have prayed for us for years. There's great need out there for dentistry. So now it's Diane's turn.
We couldn't believe that these children seemed to be terrified of us. We had walked through the littered sandy streets of Dakar, Senegal. It was very dark that night. We were going to this Muslim compound. We had found this young man who was helping us move in when we were setting up a dental clinic to support a ministry in Senegal that was helping young people that were leaving for the Christian faith. They were going to be ostracized by their Muslim families. He was helping us move our clinic in that day, and we noticed that his front tooth was missing, and he sheepishly said that he had been in a fight that last week, and he didn't like how he looked. He was having trouble eating. It was hurting him a lot, so Bob scrutinized, looked at it real closely, and he said, I think we can fix it. So he pulled out the root and made a little flipper, a little interim partial for this young man. We called him, his name was Mohammed. He's 17 years old. And a couple days later, he came to us and he said, I really want you to come and meet my family. Well, we had traversed down there, and as you know, Dakar, Senegal was the jumping off deportation part for slaves for many centuries. And we felt like two little white dots in a sea of black ink as we walked down there. It was kind of terrifying for us to be walking into this compound. When we got into the room with his father, who had multiple wives, of course, and there were lots of little children peering out between the mother's skirts and out from the doorways, and we thought, there's something not right. There was just such a thick tension in that room. So we asked our interpreter, we said, what's going on? They seemed very afraid of us, and he said, well, to tell you the truth, he said, they tell these children that if they do not obey, the white Christians will come and get them and boil them and eat them. And you are the first Christians they have ever seen from America, and they are very frightened of you. Well, we said, stop everything. Would you tell these poor people that we just have come in peace? We come because we want to just help them and share our gifts. And he did talk to them about that, and the children just immediately, the tension went away, and we sat down on the floor and got our little toys out, and it wasn't long before they were in our laps like we were favorite relatives. When we left that night, we clasped hands in true friendship, and we thought, this is why we come. We're ambassadors for Christ. We're using our gifts to show them American Christians and making a difference in those cultures, and hopefully to move them a little closer to the Lord.
Now, have you all found your purpose in life? Now, one of the people that's written a great book that's been a national bestseller is Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life. How many people have read that book? Yeah. Just about everybody here in the room. If you haven't read the book, it's right up here. But he talks about, why are we here on earth? We should be preparing for eternity.
Because we found, as says in Proverbs, that a life devoted to things is a dead life, a stump, but a God-shaped life is like a flourishing tree. These pictures shows Bob and our son Dan. They went down to Baja California on small planes with this Gideon. He was a Spanish-speaking pastor. He brought a bunch of Bibles, and that weekend they were able to just convert people right after dental treatment, right in the chair through this wonderful minister. And here he's bringing this young girl to the Lord, and it just was a great experience for our son to see also.
Life has never been better for us. And that's because we think that we're making a difference, or we're being significant. Now, another person that we like to make reference to is a guy named Bob Buford. Very successful CEO and businessman. Wrote a couple books. One called Halftime, where he talks about changing your game plan from being successful to being significant. Now, you wouldn't all be here if you weren't successful, and most of you are being very significant. Probably all of you in your life. But he talks about, one of the reasons that we go is we want to not only be successful, but we want to be significant in life. And that he talks about that in Halftime. And then he talks about finishing well. And that, once you stop being productive, you stop living. And so he says the second half of your life can be better than the first. And we're experiencing that. I mean, life couldn't be better for us. And he says, as long as you're able to do something meaningful, why would you go into some kind of holding pattern, either before retirement or, like many people, after retirement? So he talks about using your gifts and talents to be significant.
We ask ourselves the question, what do we want to be remembered for? And this shows some choirs. They were kind of impromptu. After we finished planting a church, they were trying to draw people from one of the poorest communities in Lima to this area, and they used the dentistry kind of as a draw. And afterwards, they just had the young and the old choirs just singing for us. It was probably the most angelic music we'd ever heard because it was such a glorious time.
Another person that we like to reference is Os Guinness. He is probably one of the renowned theologians and social critics of the day, written over 25 books, the great-great-grandson of Arthur Guinness, the Dublin brewer. But he wrote a book called The Call, Finding and Fulfilling the Central Purpose of Your Life. He says become an entrepreneur of life. Bring glory to God and add value to your world. So all this is talking about being significant and using your gifts.
We like this verse from 1 Peter because it's talking about using whatever God has given you. And many of you, maybe in this room, are not even dentists, but you can use the gifts, whatever the skills that he has given you to use. And this picture shows us on the left. We had gone to Acapulco on our honeymoon. And on our 25th anniversary, we decided, well, what are we going to do to celebrate? And we remembered back that behind the luxury hotel where we had stayed, just probably a block or so, there were very poor, needy areas. And we thought, well, why don't we just go back and kind of relive our honeymoon on our 25th? And this time, let's go as a mission group. And we did, and we loved it. We worked with a street kids center and an orphanage, and it was just a really great time for us to remember where God had taken us as a couple. And the other one shows in Colorado, they have a Mission of Mercy, which is for a humanitarian outreach to the underserved and the needy in our state. And so you don't have to go overseas. There's many places locally where you can also serve. And some of your states, I think it's in 12 different states now, have Mission of Mercy meetings once a year. So it's great. This shows the top picture when we went to Ecuador on a spring break once, and we did 5 different churches in 5 days. And the exciting thing was not so much the dentistry, but that in the waiting room, we had a local evangelist that was doing chalk drawings of salvation, the plan of salvation for people. And they were drawing people from all around each neighborhood of that church, drawing them into the church, and that was exciting for us. Down below it shows us in Kenya just a month ago, our latest mission trip. We were south of Nairobi working with children in a child sponsorship organization.
Many times when we go on missions, we have an opportunity to train and equip other people. I know Denny's going to talk on training lay people, but so often the physicians that are there in the developing countries have so many problems with dentistry, and there's no dentist there to do it. So the physicians very much want to learn how to do dentistry. We've been to Madagascar twice, and each time we trained physicians there that work with street kid centers. There were no dentists available. And so here we are training, and physicians make very good exodontists. Okay? Here we're training a dentist. He's taking out his first tooth in Guatemala. Physician, I'm sorry. And here's a physician taking out his first tooth in Egypt.
We also we're shocked around the world, as maybe you have seen, that there is very little sterilization of the equipment. You see this distinguished gentleman here on the left. He's an Egyptian dentist. He won't go to any dentist in his country because he himself does not have an autoclave or does not do anything. So when we were there and we were using what Randy Sanders had taught us originally, just the pressure pot on the little hot plate, and he was saying, well, I could do this. And so the next day he brought his assistant, who's in the striped sweater there, and we worked with her all day and trained her. And we're just hoping that the ripple effect with his colleagues and around the world, wherever we go, we try to teach that. We've also developed a chart that we use in the other picture. This shows Haiti, where we do a flip chart teaching oral hygiene. So many people around the world, well, forget about flossing. They hardly know about that, but we try to teach it, of course, and brushing too. So every child group or adults that we can get our hands on, we show them the flip chart. First of all, we'll show it tomorrow, but it tells why we come and basic nutrition and just what to expect when they go in. We found that alleviates a lot of fear if we can explain what they're going to experience when they come into our little clinic, and then just try to teach them, of course, good oral hygiene practices.
We also not only have opportunities to train physicians in the local countries, but the dentists, when we do find them, are so anxious to learn about how we do dentistry. And so here is a Guatemalan dentist that we worked with, and then recently, just before the overthrow of Mubarak, we were in Egypt training 4 different young Egyptian dentists on how to do dentistry the way we do it, and we equip them with a portable clinic.
And Hannah, you can see her standing here with Bob, was a dentist there, and she wrote this email right after we were there, and it just made us feel so good that we had encouraged her. It's typed just as she had sent it to us. It's kind of cute. She remembers the memories and how we went and visited her mother. You can see me down there with her mom, and it just means so much to them that we come in support of them. The follow-up to this, just a week or so ago, we got another email from her, and she had never taken off with we'd left a portable dental clinic and equipment, and we'd been back twice over a period of 2 years, and we hadn't felt like she had really utilized it, but she wrote us 2 weeks ago and said she was using it. She'd taken it out to the Nubian village, which was south of Aswan, Egypt, down there, and was working with it, and the hospital had hired her, and it was just so exciting to see that it had finally come to pass what we had envisioned.
We also look for opportunities to train American dentists and American dental auxiliary people to go on mission trips and to give them the bug for dentistry. Here we've got an orthodontist that took his daughter down to Guatemala about 4 years ago. He was hoping that he would get his daughter to become a dentist. That didn't work, but 4 years later, we went down to Uruguay with Libby here, who is now enrolled in pre-dental.
Another daughter.
Which is another daughter. And what's interesting is Ed's the 6th generation dentist going all the way back pre-Civil War time. When Libby becomes a dentist, she'll be the 7th generation dentist in that family. And missionary dentistry's helped her get that bug for how you can help people and everything.
And a little note to that, the mother that's standing there holding her hand on her husband, I ran into her in the post office 2 days ago, just now, and she said they're big bikers, mountain bikers, and someone had invited them to go to France to do a biking trip, and she looked at me and she says, I just couldn't say yes because we want to go on more dental missions. We just feel like that's much more fulfilling and much more exciting. And I thought, yes, Bob, another convert. We like to use our gifts to make a difference and to be children of the light. This is our pastor in Kenya that we were just with a month ago. And he had lost his front teeth when he was 7. He did not remember having front teeth. They are herdsmen for the Maasai tribe, and he had tripped running from a bull and knocked out his teeth, and now he was this age. And so Bob fixed him an inner and partial, that flipper that covered his front teeth. And he was so excited. We were in a tent, and people were watching the whole process, and he had part of his kids and congregation out there. And he went dancing out of the tent, and he goes, breaking announcement, your pastor has teeth. And everyone started doing this. We called it the funky chicken. Their little necks were going in their tribal dance. And it was just one of the most exciting moments we've ever had. But we love this verse because it talks about working with your hands and sharing with people in need and showing kindness and compassion, and that's our directive, of course.
Another thing that's interesting is this is the most beautiful smile anybody can have in the Maasai tribe in Kenya. And only there in the world do they think it's beautiful not to have lower central incisors. So when the kid's about 2 years old, no anesthetic or anything, they'll take a knife or whatever they have and they pry out the lower central incisors on the kid. That's the baby teeth. When they're about 8 or 9 or so, when the lower centrals are coming in, they'll do the same thing. Grab the kid down, wrestle them, and take those 2 teeth out. And 95% of the Maasai people that we saw out in this area did not have lower central incisors. That to them is the most beautiful smile imaginable, along with great big earlobes and things like that. But cultural differences.
We found that serving takes your mind off yourself. We had gone down, like we talked about several times, with these small planes out of the Southwest. They bring dentists in and they onto a dirt little landing strip, and we would get out into a little mobile clinic. And this lady in the red had come in with her pilot husband. She hobbled into the dental clinic with a cane. And in her other hand was a thick novel. That's how she planned to spend the weekend, because she says, I don't know Spanish, I don't know anything about dentistry, and I'm hurting. And I just embraced her and I said, you are a godsend to me, because 6 dentists had walked in and I was the only worker bee. And Bob needed me to assist, I needed someone to sterilize. I said, we're just going to pray about this and I can teach you sterilization. God gave her such a quick learning spirit, and she just blossomed. She put that cane down and did not pick it up the rest of the weekend. She became the best prayer warrior we've ever had. She had a wonderful sense of humor. We found that it's just really important to make people feel needed, to give them a job where they can prosper in that job, and she was just delighted. We all were.
Universally, dentistry is needed throughout the world. People universally suffer from dental disease and pain. Children, according to this study here, live for months with pain that we as grown-ups would find unendurable. And it leads to a life of hopelessness and despair. So by doing dentistry, it helps reverse that cycle of hopelessness that so many kids in the world are stuck with. Another study, done by the World Health Organization Director General, says that the gaps between the haves and the have-nots is not getting smaller. Although the world is communicating better, 5% of the world has almost 90-some% of the wealth, and 90% of the world lives in pretty much poverty, hand to mouth. And that doesn't seem to be changing. And there's not a safety net like we have in the United States. This top picture is a clinic that we have in the Colorado Springs area called KIND, or Kids in Need of Dentistry. And I think Denver has it too, where you help out the poor children that are underserved in our community. And this is another picture of the first Colorado Mission of Mercy. That was a 110-chair clinic to help out the poor people. So in America, there's safety nets, but in the rest of the world, there's often no safety nets. And these people live in terrible pain. Now this study right here, done out of Ireland, talks about 90% of the people don't have access to routine dental care. And when I first read that several years ago, I thought that's not quite true. I mean, because I come from America and routine care is available to more people than that. But the more I travel around the world, the more I realize that that's a pretty accurate figure. And here's an example. This family right here, he's a family practice physician, runs a residency program for family practice in a hospital in Aswan, Egypt. He is a trained physician, top of the pecking order in Egypt, which is a fairly progressive country. He came to visit us in America, and I asked him how his teeth were. And he said, well, I got a toothache. And I said, why didn't you get it fixed? And his answer to me was, I would rather have a toothache and lose a tooth than to get AIDS or hepatitis. Here he is, the top of the pecking order. He is not only a physician, but he teaches physicians, and he can't find a dentist that he can trust in a country like Egypt. And so even though there's people that would take the tooth out on him, he doesn't trust anybody to take his tooth out and would rather lose a tooth. So this figure, 90% of the people have access to routine dental care, which means routine sterilization. As Diane mentioned, the one dentist that we trained in Egypt initially didn't even use sterilization. So he had a toothache, which we fixed, because he wasn't willing to go to any of his buddies because he and everybody else didn't sterilize. So we find out that throughout much of the world, things like poverty and social disorder and AIDS have left millions of homeless children. This picture is basically a vacation Bible school summer camp for orphan kids in the Ukraine down by the Crimean. And we spent 2 weeks working on just about every one of these kids, like this cute little one right here, because there is no dentistry there. Now, it's hard to find good dental studies. If you haven't never looked at this book called The Oral Atlas for Oral Health, it has got great charts, diagrams, documentation, studies about dentistry in the world. And I'll just pass that one around. But here are some studies. It's hard to come with international studies that are validated, but it realizes that we have a unique opportunity to do dentistry and to help people out because there are no dentists in most parts of the world. So in India, the dentist population ratio in rural areas is 1 to 300,000. Ours in the United States is 1 to 2,000 or 2,500. Liberia has 2 dentists, and Denny just told me they have 3 dentists now in all of Liberia. Swaziland, we were just there, has 18 dentists. Haiti has 125 dentists. And I put it in quotes because when we say dentist in developing countries, they're not like American dentists. A lot of them just take teeth out. Okay?
We find that fixing teeth really gives a lot of hope to people. This is a 16-year-old in Honduras, and you can tell from that first picture, the before picture, that she's going to lose those teeth before long if we weren't able to fix. We love to do these we do this all the time when we go to give them a new smile, and it's just one of our favorite things. We find that the Christians really, truly around the world seem to be the only people with true hope. We've talked to Muslims and Buddhists and the Hindus, and they just don't know about if they are going to make it, if they're going to have any kind of eternal life. We like these verses from Romans that talk about how the Scripture gives us hope, and also how through the power of the Holy Spirit we have joy and peace. This picture of hopelessness with the barbed wire around the world, we feel like hopelessness really drains people as we meet them around the world, and in America too. If they do not have Christian hope, it drains your physical and your mental strength, drowns people in sorrow and just helplessness. But with the hope of Christ, we love the picture with Christ in control of the world, gives you life, energy, and following Christ gives hope and peace and eternal life.
We often, in developing countries, have an opportunity to preach or to give our testimony and to share about Christian hope. This is in Kenya, where we were preaching to the church there that was very similar to this church, but this is in India. Packed room only. Out the doors, listening to our message because we're Westerners that have never been there, Americans. And so we've established credibility, and they want to come hear us. And so we can tell them about Christian hope. And this picture is preaching a sermon, another church in Guatemala. Because we find out that when we can save a tooth or get people out of pain, it establishes a connection, as this young gal in Africa.
We like to help Christian ministries around the world, as Bob mentioned, establish credibility, because we want to show grace and love through our Christian walk. And this was in Senegal. A Muslim mother walked in with her child. We always give tickets out because we don't want to promise more than we can deliver. We think that that could harm the ministry. So she had one ticket, and she immediately plopped herself in the chair. We thought that was pretty interesting because most people here would put their children first. We, as a mother, would just feel that. But the little girl started crying when her mother got her turn. And we said, well, what's wrong? And she had a toothache as well. And although our schedule was packed and we didn't know if we squeezed her in, because we just want to always show all the grace and love we can in any situation.
So often, if you read the scriptures, Jesus was able to heal people physically, and then it set them up for spiritual healing. And here's a bunch of examples of what we're trying to do with dentistry in a way, is that we help somebody physically and it sets them up for spiritual healing. And we find out, because dentistry is unique, sometimes missionaries go into countries and it takes them months to years to establish credibility. Our patients come to us and we're able to touch them, and when you can touch somebody, like he is here with his hand, and get into their space and help them, in a matter of minutes, they have turned their trust over to you, and you help them out, and it opens the door to tell them about Christ. It happens time and time again. And it's just such a privilege that we have to have the skill of being a dentist and to be able to do that. No other profession can do it like we can in dentistry. And it enables us to build bridges. I mean, here's the pastor's teeth that we fixed in Kenya and everybody around jumping and singing. Here's where we are in Egypt with Habitat for Humanity. We went to a totally Muslim village, first time, and they were very distrustful of the American Christians that came into their village. We had to drink tea with them. And the first day that we were there, they would not allow us to do dentistry or medical or anything else. We worked with them, helping them build. The second day, after we'd established ourselves with them a little bit, they says, oh, you're a dentist and this is a physician. Can you help us? We have dental problems and medical problems. And so the next day or so, we helped them with their problems. And the Muslims have a saying that says, you've become one of us and we will die for you. Literally meaning that in a matter of a couple days, we've gone from total distrust to they were willing to die for us and we'd become part of that village. And it was just amazing that the bridges that we built and the doors that we opened to that whole community in just a couple days using dentistry.
Probably most of you could quote the Great Commission, but that's what we're trying to do, is follow through on what God has asked us to do through the Great Commission in Matthew. We go as door openers for Christ, as it says in Acts, to be witnesses to the ends of the earth, and to go out for that plentiful harvest in Matthew. And in Revelation, we're trying to go out and represent Christ to tell people that he wants an individual relationship with them. He wants a personal relationship with each person in the world.
Sometimes we feel like we're a pebble that you take and you throw on this pond and you watch the ripples go across to the opposite side. You never know sometimes how you're going to impact who you're treating or the people that you're working with in the developing countries. This young man here had come 13 hours with a toothache to get treated down in Mexico. And he had a lower first molar that was infected. At midnight on Friday night, we did a root canal on the tooth. And Saturday, the next day, we worked all day. He was around with intense interest watching us. And I went over to ask him if he was okay, and he was okay. We got ready to leave on Sunday the next day. This is one of these weekend trips that we go on. And our interpreter came and said the family wanted to talk to us. And so we went out to talk to his family here, and he gave me the cross that he had around his neck, which was a silver cross, the most valuable possession that he owned. And like the ripple effect, this guy is going to have an impact for Christ, and he wants to pay back the good that was done to him in some way. So we're just wondering how God is using him to pay back the good for good. Because dentistry truly does and has changed many lives. Here's a 16-year-old in Senegal, and she got a smile back. And it just meant the world to her. Another reason we go, and this whole lecture is kind of why we're doing it, okay? Giving you inspiration why we're doing it. We go to see God's power manifest. Sometimes in America, I mean, we're so complacent that we don't really see God at work here so often. But when we go to developing countries, it's amazing to see God at work. And this is just one story. This gal here had a toothache, hadn't been able to sleep for a couple months. She came into the clinic and had a lower first molar that was all broken down, needed to be extracted. Fairly routine procedure. You numb her up with a mandibular block, and she was numb. You know, her lip was numb, her tongue was numb. You know, I touched the tissue around it, the long buccal nerve was numb. So I go to touch the tooth. As soon as I touch that tooth, she raises up out of the chair with this terrible mourn. And it's like, oh, I guess she's not numb. And meantime, our missionary pastor, Gideon, you know, is telling her about God and what we're doing there, that we care about her. And I thought, well, maybe she's got accessory innervation. So I numb the mylohyoid, the auriculotemporal, the facial nerve, and I go to touch the tooth again. Immediately, as soon as I touch that tooth, she almost jumps out of the chair and yells out. And our pilot was in there watching what we were doing, and he goes, oh, I can't stand it, you know. And he left. And I went, you know, she's numb. What's going on? So I had an interosseous, you know, and we did an interosseous, which is injecting right into the bone around the tooth. Never had that not work. So we did that, went to touch the tooth again, out of the chair she's again, you know, just like in pain. He's talking to her and telling her, I don't know what else to do. I stepped back and I asked a few of the people, like the prayer warrior gal that was in the cane and stuff, to pray for a couple of minutes over this patient. Because I thought I was going to have to let her go because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even touch that tooth. Even though I could touch the tissue all around it, everything was numb. I used 3 different kinds of anesthetic. You know, I did everything. But after we prayed, and after he had a chance to work for her, I went back one last time, touched the tooth, nothing happened. She sat there as calm as could be. We took the tooth out, and as soon as that tooth came out, she jumped up and she accepted Christ and was just as joyful. I mean, her whole life had changed. She was all around everything, and somehow that tooth was tied into her salvation. I don't know how. But if it would have just come out the first time, he wouldn't have had the chance to talk to her, tell her about God, and set her up for the spiritual healing. So here's an example of physical healing going to spiritual healing.
This is another story of God using evil for good. If you see down below, you see 4 generations in our family. Bob, his mom, it's our first grandchild, and our son. Well, years ago, there was a terrible accident in Bob's family. I have to tell this because he has trouble getting through it, but they lost he lost 2 brothers in a car accident. They were struck by drunk drivers. They were 11 and 17. And the family was so devastated by this, although they were Christians and their faith was so strong that they had God gave them an amazing spirit of forgiveness at that time. And they had many people in their home. It was a small town in Oregon that would come and minister to them, and they would minister to people. Well, we just never thought anything about it, but we were flying down with this young man on the right there on this small plane, and we started talking about where we were from, and he said that he had been in Bob's parents' home 25 years before, and it had deeply affected him, their whole spirit of forgiveness, and he had changed his life. And here, 25 years later, he was serving us and serving the Lord. It was a very sweet moment to see how something so evil could come for good. And you don't usually see that on a short-term mission where you see the end results of what you do, but this story was just something special that God allowed us to experience, I believe, to know that he is at work in our lives, even in our tragedies, even in bad things that happen to us. We also like to go to see God at work. This is Madagascar. We went back twice. The first time was in this little storefront, and they just had 100 kids, and they were struggling along. A couple years later, we went back, and through the generosity of a lot of American churches and people that had come, work and witness, troops, and they had this huge center built. They were up to 400 children that they were ministering to. And it was so exciting to see that God had really, really blessed that ministry. So that just encourages our faith to see that happen. Also, we've seen God at work in both big and small ways. We went to a Sudanese refugee school in Cairo, and it was so exciting. Maybe some of you have filled the little shoe boxes of love that have gone around the world. We were on the other side, and we got to see those kids get them, and it was so exciting. It just made their day. They were dancing around. Right before that, they'd put on a big Christian performance with music to tell them that it was from Christians around the world. It was a huge evangelism tool, so encourage people that do those little things, that it makes a huge difference, and another way that people at home can help. 2 years ago, we were at the Breckenridge Conference. You probably, most of you heard Billy Graham Palouse, and they had this big conference center in Ramaswamy. I think you heard from Gillum's last year, because we got to go with them. And they were building this huge conference center, and it was so exciting to be on the end, having heard about it here and being pulled over there to see the new dental clinic that was being built and to work in it. We got to work on
there.
Billy Graham's dad was our first patient in the brand new chairs that Robert Kinsel had sent, and it was so exciting to see God working in that way with the Hindu people. It was just a tremendous blessing to us to have heard the story, followed the call, and then seen it happening. Just builds our faith.
Now, we see some persecution in America against Christianity, but nothing like the persecution that they see in the Muslim world or in the Hindu world or over in China or over in North Korea and some of the other places. And you go sometimes to see how faithful the Christians are in great distress and adversity. This pastor in India had his picture on a poster, and they actually cut his head out, and they said that's what they were going to do to him. And he'd been beaten before and was under constant persecution by the Hindus. In Mongolia, this is 1 o'clock in the morning after we showed them the Jesus film, and converting them by flashlight, because in Mongolia, they were taken over by communism, by the Russians. And in communism, their God is their state. Now, when their God, the state, failed them in 1990, they were left without a religion. So Mongolia is wide open to Christianity. And I know Gail's going to go down there to Mongolia in August. Amazing place. I mean, one generation ago, there were a handful of Christians. Now there's thousands of them, and Mongolia is just booming for Christ because everybody needs a God. This is in Moldova, which is the poorest country in Eastern Europe. We were there with a ministry, and they had the worst flooding they'd had in 200 years. So the last day that we were there, we pooled all of our money and bought as many supplies, food stuff that we could, and we went to a village that was hardest hit and found the 40th most destitute families, and were able to spread Christian love there. And it's just amazing to see how God was working there. I mean, we have whole stories about that trip. Another reason that we go is the Christian missionaries that are overseas often have a hard road to go, and they need to be encouraged. And oftentimes, this is in Madagascar, the missionaries, no matter which church they're with or what their ministry, they'll gather together to mutually support each other. And we were there at one of their meetings, and it was really neat to see. Now, in the capital of Madagascar, they don't have enough power to run the capital all night, so there's roving blackouts. So the power's off here, and we're using a flashlight, and all the missionary kids have to come over and see the dentist because there are no dentists over there, and the missionary kids need to see a dentist too. But so we go to encourage the missionaries. This is in Swaziland. This is a physician and a PA wife and their family that goes out and does AIDS clinics throughout Swaziland. And they've been doing that for years. And while we were there, a baby was dropped off at the front porch and abandoned. And so that's the little baby. Unfortunately, we couldn't bring the baby home. But things like that happen throughout the world. And just to encourage the Christian missionaries over there, by our going over there and showing them love and support, is another reason for going. We get a lot of support and encouragement. You know, if you can't tell by just what we're talking about and all the experiences and stuff, we get a lot of support. This is in Argentina, took a team of 26 down there, which were dentists and construction workers and stuff, and we're going over Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life. That was, 12 years ago when it first came out, and we were encouraging each other. Here Diane is in India, and these are all orphans from the tsunami that hit in 2004, and we're working on the orphan kids, and to see that they're smiling and they're encouraged and they're being helped in spite of not having parents and all the struggles that they have, it encourages us. It encourages us not to be afraid. Max Lucado, has written a bunch of books, determined to be one of the best preachers in America. He says, imagine your life without fear. Because it's a little fearful to step out of your comfort zone and go to these developing countries sometimes. But we don't seem to have any fear because God's in charge. He says, when Jesus is great, our fears are not. And he says, if you get fearful, which we do from time to time, here or anywhere we go, face your fear with honest prayer. And so this is just a word to encourage you. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone.
The world is a beautiful, crazy place full of cultural diversity that we just enjoy thoroughly. We love the adventure and the wonderment of it. It just gives us a great dimension to our lives. Whether it is going out in Mongolia to do dentistry in these little gers, these people put on their best outfits for us so they could pose with us when we said we wanted a picture with them. They said, wait a minute, we got to go get dressed. And they fixed themselves all up. Whether it's riding camels around the pyramids, the children everywhere. I'm a school teacher and pediatric nurse, and I just love children, so they're beautiful wherever I go. A lemur on Bob's back in Madagascar. That's a live crocodile from the Nile that I'm holding there. Very fun. We went on a safari down in Kruger National Park in South Africa. We were about 10 feet from a giraffe kill. These lions were chomping on a little baby giraffe, and it was quite the experience. I don't know. And you never know where you're going to eat, but that's exciting too. We were given spoons and told to sit down by this bowl and eat together in Africa, and that was fine. And there's our little lover's hut where we got to stay, so that was kind of fun. This is just our last trip to Kenya, and Bob is standing on a termite hill there just goofing off because the bus had stopped. They had such immense holes they could not work the bus over those without unloading. So we unloaded to get over, and we were just having fun. We also rode ostriches at an ostrich farm there, had goat meat that was shish kebabbed over a fire. We were that close to a giraffe in Amboseli National Park, which is right at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro. Beautiful, beautiful spot. And this is one of our team members trying to jump with the Maasai. They were having a competition that night at the resort. I think he jumped a little higher, at least we tell him he did. Also, when we finished at the Dominican Republic last year, we were up right on the northern border of Haiti. We were hot and tired, and we were ready to go home, but we had the local bus driver, and we said, we haven't seen the Caribbean. Would you be able to stop at a beach on the way home? A beach. Wow. He found this for us, and it was isolated. The water was the warmest ever. The sand was the softest ever. It was the most beautiful spot in the world, we thought, and so we were very excited about that. A footnote to that, the church we're going to has decided to sponsor the group close to that, and our pastor just went and we said, don't miss the beach, and he didn't, so he loved that.
We find out that true discipleship involves following Christ and doing His will wherever that path may lead. Whether it's children that you treated in India singing and dancing for you, which is beautiful, or this is in outer Mongolia, the furthest military outpost in the world guarding the Russian, Mongolian, China border, and they patrol on horseback. We were able, because of dentistry and the ministry there, to open the doors to show the Jesus film on a military post in Mongolia for the first time ever. And the commander there I was able to relate to him because I had 30 years in the military, and he gave me a Siberian wolf pelt that he had shot. And so just amazing things happen to you that you never expect.
We like to use it as an example to our families, and this lady on the left was in my quilting group for several years, and you can tell her teeth aren't really very good. She's over 70. She had been saving money forever. She wanted it fixed. And finally one day she came to me and she said, you know, I think that you could use this money better. I'm kind of old and I've gotten used to my teeth. Why don't you just take this money that I've set aside? And so when I reported back to her how we had used it and all, she said, you know, that's been so strange. I get up every morning and I smile at myself in the mirror and I think I'm beautiful now. She says, I don't worry about my teeth because I just think about all the people that money helped. And so it really made a difference to her. These are our kids, and you probably might recognize this in Belize. They are Denny and Bonnie. We took them 12 years ago. On spring break, we had always gone down. Denny and Bonnie go every year for 12 years or plus. And we decided we would go, and we'd always taken a family vacation to, Disney World or, Grand Canyon or someplace fun. And they went, and they were all teenagers, and they said, still to this day, that it was the best family vacation we ever had because we worked together and we served together. So it was really good.
Another reason to go is that it increases an appreciation for what we have and decreases our dependence on material things. Okay, this same trip in Belize, our young girls were playing with the local children who were barefoot, and the children asked our daughters how many pairs of shoes they had. And they were embarrassed to tell them that their closet was full of shoes. And when they got back, they realized that they didn't need more shoes or need all this other stuff that they had, because these poor children were happy with no shoes at all. Now, whenever I'm at the end of the day or I'm doing something that's really tough, I think of this picture here, because this is in Madagascar, and these are elderly ladies squatting down, making gravel by hand in the hot sun all day long. And if we ever think we have it rough, I think of this picture here, and I can imagine sitting on my haunches all day in the sun making gravel by hand.
We really enjoy the adventure and the relationships and friendships that we meet, nothing more than between ourselves and our marriage. This shows us again on our 25th anniversary. And I've heard other spouses say this too, that it is so exciting to watch your husband or wife do what they do well. And it's just really fun for me to admire his skills and work with him with that. And we just share this passion and adventure, and it just changes our marriage and gives it life. And this team we took from our community, a 6-chair community to the clinic to Dominican Republic. Everything from this little 10-year-old girl to a 65-year-old dentist. And we just had such a great time with them, and we still see them, and we're very close to them in our community. All of them have gone on subsequent trips with us since that time, because it was just like a family feeling, like a family vacation. We just had a great time together.
And we find out that if we can take families, dentistry becomes a family affair, and families that serve together grow together. Okay, here's a dentist with his daughter, and here's an orthodontist with his wife, and here's a young female dentist with her husband in Kenya there. And we find out that if we can get the family involved, it blesses the family and the family grows.
We do go back some and have continuing relationships with people that we know. We've talked about this family in Egypt that we really enjoy, and we have emails with them. We're prayer partners with them, especially as they've gone through this revolution. We're on the computer quite a bit with them. This Finland nurse up above had a little turtle named Lucy. We've been back twice to visit her and Lucy. She's been 30 years isolated in a little Nubian village south of Aswan, and she just loves the encouragement, and we get to talk with her. This ENT doctor down in Aswan, I tell you, he's been through it. He had 2 near-fatal car accidents that it just changed his life. He had hepatitis that he barely survived. And also, he has 2 boys that live in wheelchairs. They have a shortened lifespan. They have a form of genetic muscular dystrophy. But he has the most radiant testimony of how God has blessed him anyway. Through all of that, we have taken our teams to hear that. He's written a book about it. Just amazing to see how you can overcome adversity.
It's always neat to be able to interact with the physicians and the dentists in the local communities. And get a professional exchange of information. Here's a Madagascar physician learning how to take teeth out, and we're exchanging information with her. Here's that Egyptian dentist that didn't sterilize until after we worked with him. And here's a young Guatemalan dentist working in Honduras and train her how to use a rubber dam and stuff and exchange information with her. So it's exciting to do that and promote Christian fellowship. This Uruguayan dentist, good dentist, because we went to Uruguay and he worked with us, he realized he could do portable dentistry. Now, Fields of Fatherless, which is the mission that we worked with down there with him, he has now got portable equipment and he's helping them with their mission because he saw if we could do it, he could do that. And so that was a blessing there. This is a dentist that's in Cuba. It's tough to be a dentist in Cuba. He is the head of the Christian Medical and Dental Society in Cuba. And the navigators came to me and said, we need to give this guy some encouragement. Can you come down there and interact with him and share information? So we did. We went to Cuba, and a great guy. Interesting note, I mean, they have dentists in Cuba, but they don't have any supplies. He would take a carpio of anesthetic and say, I'll use this carpio of anesthetic on you if you'll read this Bible tract. And so I'll put a white filling in this tooth rather than a silver filling if you'll read this Bible tract, because he didn't have any supplies. And so he's using
I don't know if we
what he has
recommend that,
but and he was getting away with it. But anyway, promoting Christian fellowship.
It's also an opportunity to witness to everyone. We always come back and tell our office staff about it. And this is our family. Over here we have a son and 2 daughters. They're all married. We have 5 grandchildren. And we just hope, we're actually writing our stories up, that we will pass it down in the family so that they all know that their grandparents, love the Lord and was willing to do that. So we're trying to keep a record of that as well. This has become our motto. I'm wearing my starfish necklace because this is our life theme, and you've probably all heard it, but it's the story of a little girl walking along the ocean after the tide has gone out, and there's a lot of starfish up there that are just going to burn in the sun. They're going to die. And so she's tossing them back, and a cynical old person comes along and says, little girl, you're just wasting your time. This is crazy. You can't save them all. And often we feel that way. We feel a little overwhelmed when we go out there and we see the huge need and the huge need for Christ especially. But this little girl bends down and she picks one up and she throws it in and she looks at that cynical old person and she says, well, it mattered to that one. So all the time on our trips, we often look at each other and we say, well, it mattered to that one. Even if it's just one on a trip, it's worth going because God cares for each person, as he talks about in the parable of the lost sheep, that each individual matters to God. And so whatever we can do, if everyone does a little bit, it can be a huge impact on the world.
So in summary, why do we go? And the tooth standing up there and all excited here. We go because it fulfills our purpose in life, like it talks about in some of these books, that we are turning success into significance and we're making a difference. It's our calling. Okay? We help the underserved of the world, and that's always a good thing to do. It opens doors and builds bridges to Christ. The physical healing aspect transitioning to the spiritual healing. By experiencing God's power at work, it greatly encourages us. We've never been happier or never felt more significant than we're on the mission field or planning a mission trip. It supports and encourages the Christians that are missionaries overseas. Diane talked about the adventure and wonderment. And don't sell it short. We always take a day or two to see the sights and do a little shopping and stuff. I mean, because you can't do dentistry 24/7. And we'll go over tomorrow how we do it, but it's always nice to have a little bit of adventure and wonderment. It sets an example of service for our family, our friends, and our community. It increases appreciation for what we have and decreases our dependence on material things. It builds friendships and relationships. No better friendship and relationships than Diane and I here, so it's great for that. There's a professional exchange of information whenever we go, like we're exchanging information here. And last but not least, it's an opportunity to witness and share our faith, not only overseas, but in our practice, in our home, and in our community. So those, in a nutshell, is kind of why we go on mission trips. So let me leave you with our favorite verse, which is good for the mission field, but it's good for every day here. And it's saying, rejoice in the Lord always. And as dentists, let your gentleness be evident to all. Don't be anxious about anything, okay, but present your request to God. And what we have as Christians, more than any other religion in the world, more than anybody else in the world, is we have the peace of God which guards our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So we'll leave with that verse. Okay, I mean, you all got a handout there. If you ever have any questions, want to contact us, here's our way to contact us. These are our upcoming missions that we've got just in the next year. We've been blessed to be able to go about 4 times a year overseas, and these are where we're going. And there are more countries on the docket than we can count, and every place we go they want us to come back. So we don't anticipate that this is going to slow down at all. Okay, so are there any questions on why we do missionary? I think our time's pretty much up. We'll be around the whole conference, so come and ask us. We're excited to be able to present tomorrow on how we do it. And I'm going to bring a fully functional clinic and set it up here from what we carried on the plane with us. So you're going to see how we do it tomorrow, from 1 chair to 6 chairs, surgery, restorative, endodontics, or restorative. It can all come with us just on the plane trip on the 50-pound bags. So thank you all for your attention. We're excited to have a chance to present to you. And that's it for the first.
I think we're preaching to the choir. You all do that too.
This is a scary thing for me to say, that I know a lot of you dentists.